The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Millbrook, a small town nestled between rolling hills in rural Tennessee. Dr. Amanda Chen pulled her worn pickup truck into the parking space behind the Millbrook Animal Clinic, the same routine she'd followed for the past 5 years. At 38, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to blend into the background. Her black hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothes simple and functional. The brass nameplate on her office door read, Amanda Chen, DVM. And to everyone in Millbrook, that's exactly who she was. A competent veterinarian who had moved to their town after completing her studies. Someone who cared for their animals with skill and compassion. What they didn't know, what she had carefully hidden for 5 years, was that those steady hands had once performed some of the most complex neurosurgeries in the country. Dr. Amanda Chen, the woman who now treated farm animals and family pets, had once been Dr. Amanda Chen, one of the youngest neurosurgeons ever to head a department at Metropolitan General Hospital in Nashville. She had saved hundreds of lives, pioneered new surgical techniques, and been featured on the cover of Medical Journal International. But that was before everything fell apart, before the system she had devoted her life to serving had failed her so completely that she could no longer bear to be part of it. The transformation hadn't been easy. Veterinary school had required 4 additional years of study, learning new anatomy, different diseases, alternative treatment methods. But animals, she had discovered, were honest patients. They didn't lie about their symptoms, didn't demand unnecessary procedures for insurance fraud, and their families genuinely cared about their well-being rather than potential lawsuit settlements. Amanda unlocked the clinic door and flipped on the lights, beginning her daily routine of checking on the overnight patients. In the recovery area, a golden retriever named Charlie wagged his tail weakly as she approached. He'd undergone surgery the previous day to remove a tumor from his leg, a procedure that required the same precision she'd once used to remove tumors from human brains, though she'd never tell his owners that. "How are you feeling this morning, boy?" she asked, gently examining the surgical site. The incision was healing perfectly, her sutures holding strong. The muscle memory of surgical precision never truly faded, even when applied to a different species. Mrs. Peterson, Charlie's owner, had cried when Amanda explained that the tumor was benign, that her beloved companion would make a full recovery. Those tears had meant more to Amanda than any professional accolade she'd received in her previous career. Here, in this small clinic, her work had immediate, visible impact on families who genuinely loved their animals. The bell above the front door chimed, announcing the arrival of her assistant, Jenny Morrison, a cheerful 25-year-old who had grown up in Millbrook and never imagined working anywhere else. "Morning, Dr. Chen," Jenny called out as she hung up her coat. "How's Charlie doing?" "Much better. He should be ready to go home this afternoon," Amanda replied, updating Charlie's chart with her morning observations. Jenny had been with the clinic for 3 years, since Amanda had been able to afford an assistant. The young woman had a natural way with animals and had proven invaluable in managing the day-to-day operations of the practice. More importantly, she had become something Amanda hadn't expected to find in Millbrook, a friend. "Oh, I almost forgot," Jenny said, pulling a folded newspaper from her bag. "Did you see the article about the new doctor at the hospital? He's apparently some hotshot from Atlanta, comes from a family of doctors. The paper makes him sound like he's going to revolutionize healthcare in our little town." Amanda glanced at the newspaper photo Jenny showed her. Dr. Marcus Reed looked exactly like what she'd expected. Young, confident, with the kind of polished appearance that came from prestigious medical schools and family money. His smile in the photo had the practiced quality of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "I'm sure he'll do fine," Amanda said diplomatically, though something in the young doctor's expression reminded her of colleagues she'd known in Nashville. Brilliant, perhaps, but convinced of their own superiority. The morning passed quietly with routine appointments, vaccinations for a litter of puppies, a checkup for an elderly cat with diabetes, and treatment for a horse with a minor injury. Amanda found peace in the predictable rhythm of her work, the trust her patients placed in her, and the genuine gratitude of their owners. Around noon, Jenny returned from lunch with news that would prove prophetic. I stopped by the diner, and everyone's talking about the new doctor. Apparently, he was there this morning and made some comments about how backwards rural medicine is. Said something about hoping he wouldn't have to stay long in this primitive place. Amanda frowned, recognizing the attitude. She'd encountered it before. Young doctors who viewed rural assignments as stepping stones to better positions, who couldn't see past their own ambitions to appreciate the communities they served. People are already starting to resent him, Jenny continued. You know how folks here feel about outsiders who think they're better than us? The afternoon brought a call that illustrated exactly why Amanda had chosen veterinary medicine over human medicine. Tom Bradley, a local farmer, called in distress about his prize bull, Thor, who had somehow managed to get his head stuck in a fence while trying to reach grass on the other side. Doc, I hate to bother you, but I can't get him free and he's starting to panic, Tom explained over the phone. I'm afraid he might hurt himself worse if he keeps struggling. I'll be right there, Amanda assured him, gathering her emergency kit. The drive to Tom's farm took her through the heart of Millbrook's countryside, past fields dotted with cattle and horses, farmhouses with wraparound porches, and families who had worked the same land for generations. This was the world she had chosen over the sterile corridors and political machinations of hospital life. Tom Bradley was waiting anxiously by the fence when she arrived. Thor, all 1,500 pounds of him, had indeed wedged his massive head between two fence posts and was beginning to show signs of distress. He's been like this for about an hour, Tom explained. I tried everything I could think of, but I'm afraid if I push too hard, I might hurt his neck. Amanda approached the situation with the same methodical analysis she'd once applied to complex surgical cases. She examined the angle of Thor's head, the position of his neck, and the structure of the fence. The solution required understanding anatomy, physics, and animal psychology. We need to sedate him slightly, she determined. Just enough to relax him so we can manipulate his position without him panicking. The procedure took 45 minutes of careful work. Amanda administered a mild sedative, then worked with Tom to gradually adjust Thor's position until they could safely extract his head from the fence. The bull emerged unharmed but thoroughly embarrassed, much to the relief of everyone involved. I don't know how to thank you, Doc, Tom said as they watched Thor rejoin his herd, apparently none the worse for his adventure. Dr. Patterson would have just told me to call the fire department, or maybe suggested putting the poor fellow down. Dr. Patterson had been Millbrook's previous veterinarian, an older man who had practiced medicine the same way for 40 years. While competent, he had lacked Amanda's innovative approach to problem-solving and her willingness to think outside traditional solutions. Thor's fine, and that's what matters, Amanda replied, cleaning her equipment. These were the moments that reminded her why she had chosen this path, the immediate, tangible difference she could make in the lives of both animals and the people who cared for them. The drive back to town took her past Millbrook General Hospital, a small but well-equipped facility that served the surrounding rural communities. She noticed several expensive cars in the parking lot and remembered that Dr. Reed had officially started his position that week. The hospital administrator, Robert Hayes, had been spreading word around town about their new, renowned specialist and how fortunate Millbrook was to have attracted such talent. Amanda had met Hayes once, at a community health fair where the hospital and veterinary clinic had both set up information booths. He had struck her as the type of administrator more interested in prestige and publicity than patient care, exactly the kind of person who would be impressed by credentials rather than competence. That evening, Amanda sat on the porch of her small house on Elm Street, a modest two-bedroom home she had purchased with the money from selling her Nashville condominium. The house was nothing like her former penthouse apartment with its city views and modern furnishings, but it suited her current life perfectly. The front porch offered a view of the town square, and the backyard was large enough for her own small vegetable garden. As she sipped her coffee and watched the sun set behind the hills, Amanda reflected on the path that had brought her here. 5 years ago, she had been Dr. Amanda Chen, neurosurgeon, whose days were filled with life and death decisions, complex procedures, and the constant pressure of hospital politics. Now she was Dr. Amanda Chen, veterinarian, whose biggest challenge that day had been extracting a bull's head from a fence. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using many of the same skills: diagnostic thinking, surgical precision, calm decision-making under pressure, but in service of an entirely different patient population. Animals couldn't thank her in words, but their recovery spoke louder than any human gratitude she'd received in her previous career. Her phone rang, interrupting her evening reflection. Jenny's voice was excited when Amanda answered. "Dr. Chen, I just heard from my cousin who works at the hospital. Apparently, Dr. Reed made quite an impression on his first day. Word is he criticized the nursing staff, complained about the equipment, and generally acted like he was slumming it in our little hospital." Amanda sighed, recognizing the pattern. Some people need time to adjust to new environments. "Maybe," Jenny said, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. "But from what I heard, he's not even trying to adjust. He's just counting the days until he can get a position somewhere more prestigious." After ending the call, Amanda stood at her window looking out at the quiet streets of Millbrook. Street lamps cast pools of warm light along the sidewalks, and she could see families gathering on their porches, children playing in yards, neighbors chatting over fence lines. This was the community she had chosen, the life she had built after walking away from everything she had once thought defined her. She had no way of knowing that within 48 hours, that carefully constructed new life would be challenged in ways she couldn't imagine. The past she had left behind and the present she had built were about to collide, forcing her to choose between the anonymity she cherished and the skills that had once made her one of the most respected surgeons in the country. But that night, as Millbrook settled into peaceful sleep around her, Amanda Chen was simply a veterinarian ending another satisfying day of caring for the animals that trusted her with their lives. The next morning brought the kind of routine that Amanda had grown to appreciate. The clinic opened at 8, and her first appointment was with Mrs. Henderson's elderly cat, Whiskers, who needed his monthly checkup for kidney disease. Mrs. Henderson, a widow in her 70s, treated Whiskers like the child she'd never had, and their monthly visits had become as much about reassuring her as treating the cat. "How has he been eating?" Amanda asked, gently examining Whiskers while the orange tabby purred contentedly in her hands. "Oh, much better since you changed his diet," Mrs. Henderson replied, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap. "He's even been playing with that feather toy again. I was so worried." Amanda smiled, understanding the deeper concern. For many of her elderly clients, their pets were their primary companions, their daily source of joy and purpose. Caring for these animals meant caring for the entire family unit, understanding the emotional as well as medical needs involved. "His kidney function is stable," Amanda assured her after reviewing the latest blood work results. "The diet change and medication are working well. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." The relief on Mrs. Henderson's face was immediate and profound. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I don't know what Whiskers and I would do without you." As Amanda walked Mrs. Henderson and Whiskers to the front door, she noticed a sleek silver BMW pulling into the parking lot. The car looked distinctly out of place among the pickup trucks and family sedans that usually filled her lot. Through the windshield, she could see a man in an expensive suit checking his appearance in the rearview mirror. Jenny, who had been updating patient files at the front desk, looked up with curiosity. "Expecting someone new?" "Not that I know of," Amanda replied, watching as the car door opened and Dr. Marcus Reed stepped out. Even in person, he carried himself with the confident air she'd noticed in his newspaper photo. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his dark hair styled with the kind of precision that required regular professional maintenance. The bell chimed as Dr. Reed entered the clinic, his eyes immediately scanning the interior with the critical gaze of someone accustomed to finding fault. The clinic was clean and well organized, with modern equipment visible through the open treatment room doors, but Amanda could see him cataloging everything he found insufficient. "Good morning," Amanda said professionally. "I'm Dr. Chen. How can I help you?" Reed's expression shifted to one of mild surprise, as if he hadn't expected the veterinarian to be a woman. "Dr. Reed," he said, extending his hand with a grip that was firm to the point of being aggressive. "Marcus Reed. I'm the new chief of medicine at Millbrook General." "Welcome to Millbrook," Amanda replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite sensing an undercurrent of condescension in his manner. "Thank you. I'm making rounds to introduce myself to the other healthcare providers in the area," Reed said, though his tone suggested this was more obligation than genuine interest. "I understand you handle the veterinary needs for the community." The way he said veterinary needs made it sound like a lesser calling, something Amanda had encountered before from medical doctors who viewed veterinary medicine as somehow inferior to human medicine. She had learned not to take such attitudes personally, though they still stung. "That's right. We provide comprehensive veterinary care for companion animals and livestock in the area," Amanda responded evenly. Reed nodded absently, his attention already seeming to wander. "Interesting. I'm sure it's fulfilling work. Quite different from real medicine, of course, but I'm sure the animals appreciate your efforts." Jenny's eyes widened at the casual dismissal, and Amanda felt her jaw tighten slightly. "Veterinary medicine requires many of the same skills as human medicine," she said calmly. "Diagnosis, surgery, emergency care, the principles are largely the same." "Oh, I'm sure there are similarities," Reed agreed with the indulgent tone of someone humoring a child. "Though, of course, the complexity and stakes are quite different. When you're dealing with human lives, the margin for error is essentially zero. The level of precision required, the years of specialized training." He trailed off with a shrug that suggested the comparison was self-evident. Amanda bit back her first response, reminding herself that this man knew nothing about her background or qualifications. "You're right that both fields require specialized training and precision," she said diplomatically. Reed glanced at his expensive watch, a gesture that seemed calculated to demonstrate his busy importance. "Well, I should let you get back to your patients. I'm sure you have a busy day of checkups and routine procedures ahead." After he left, Jenny stared at the door with obvious irritation. "Can you believe that guy? Real medicine? As if what you do doesn't matter." The rest of the morning passed with routine appointments, but Amanda found herself distracted by memories she usually kept locked away. Images of operating rooms, complex surgeries, the rush of saving human lives. All the things she had walked away from and tried not to miss. During lunch, Jenny brought more news from her network of town gossips. "My friend Lisa works at the hospital, and she says Dr. Reed spent his first week reorganizing everything and criticizing how things were done before he arrived. Apparently, he told the nursing staff that they needed to raise their standards to match his expectations." Amanda frowned, recognizing the pattern. New doctors, especially those from prestigious backgrounds, sometimes felt the need to assert their authority by criticizing existing systems. It was rarely an effective way to build relationships or improve patient care. The nurses are already talking about requesting transfers, Jenny continued. And get this, he apparently told Administrator Hayes that Millbrook General could become a flagship rural hospital under his leadership, whatever that means. The afternoon brought an emergency call that illustrated exactly why Amanda preferred veterinary medicine to hospital politics. A local rancher's horse had stepped on a nail, and the wound needed immediate cleaning and treatment to prevent infection. As Amanda worked to clean and dress the wound, she found herself thinking about the differences between her current practice and her former career. Here, success was measured by the animal's recovery and the owner's relief. There were no insurance companies questioning every decision, no hospital administrators demanding cost-cutting measures that compromised care, no colleagues undermining each other for advancement. The horse, a gentle mare named Bella, stood patiently while Amanda worked, trust evident in her calm demeanor. Animals, Amanda had learned, were remarkably good judges of character. They responded to competence and kindness without caring about degrees or pedigree. "She's going to be fine," Amanda assured the rancher as she applied the final bandage. "Keep the wound clean and dry and call me if you notice any signs of infection." "Thank you, Doc. I don't know what we'd do without you," the rancher replied, echoing the sentiment Amanda heard from grateful pet owners throughout the week. Driving back to town, Amanda passed the hospital again and noticed the parking lot was busier than usual. Through the emergency room windows, she could see more activity than normal for a Tuesday afternoon. A nagging concern began to form in the back of her mind, though she couldn't explain why. That evening, as she was closing the clinic, her phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Dr. Chen?" The voice was stressed, unfamiliar. "This is Nurse Patricia Williams from Millbrook General. I got your number from the emergency contact list. I know this is unusual, but I need to ask you something." Amanda felt her pulse quicken. "What can I do for you?" "Do you have any experience with emergency medicine? I mean, I know you're a veterinarian, but—" The nurse's voice trailed off, as if she were questioning her own judgment in making the call. "What's the situation?" Amanda asked, her medical instincts taking over. "We have a multi-vehicle accident coming in. A tour bus collided with several cars on Highway 12. Initial reports suggest multiple casualties, some serious. Dr. Reed is here, but—" Another pause, filled with uncertainty. "But what?" "He's never handled anything like this. He's a specialist, not an emergency physician. And we're short-staffed because 2 of our nurses called in sick. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I heard you were really good with emergency situations when that prize bull got stuck last month, and I thought maybe—" The request hung in the air between them. Amanda understood what the nurse was really asking, and why she was reluctant to ask it directly. Professional boundaries, liability issues, and Dr. Reed's ego all stood in the way of what might be necessary for patient care. "How many casualties are we talking about?" Amanda asked, her mind automatically shifting into the analytical mode she'd honed during years of trauma surgery. "At least 12 injured, 6 serious. The nearest trauma center is an hour away, and with the storm moving in, helicopter transport might not be possible." Amanda closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and Whiskers, about Tom Bradley and Thor, about all the animals and families who depended on her quiet, uncomplicated life as a small-town veterinarian. Then she thought about 12 injured people who might die while she struggled with her own desire for anonymity. "I'll be right there," she heard herself saying. As she grabbed her emergency medical kit, one she had quietly maintained with supplies that went far beyond veterinary needs, Amanda Chen prepared to step out of the shadows and back into the world of human medicine. She had no idea that within the next few hours, she would be forced to reveal not just her medical skills, but the entire truth about who she really was. The storm clouds gathering on the horizon seemed to mirror the approaching collision between her carefully constructed present and the powerful past she had tried so hard to leave behind. The emergency room at Millbrook General was in controlled chaos when Amanda arrived. The first ambulance had just pulled up, its red and blue lights strobing against the darkening sky. She could hear the radio chatter from the EMTs as they prepared to unload their first patient. Amanda was quiet for a moment, processing the encounter. She had met many doctors like Marcus Reed during her years in human medicine. Brilliant, perhaps, but limited by their own arrogance. They couldn't see beyond their narrow definition of importance and value. Some people measure worth differently than others, Amanda said finally, returning to her examination room to prepare for the next appointment. But the encounter had stirred something in her that she'd worked hard to keep buried. For 5 years, she had found peace in her new identity, satisfaction in her work with animals, and genuine happiness in the quiet rhythms of small-town life. Reed's casual dismissal had awakened old feelings of frustration with the medical establishment's hierarchy and prejudices. Nurse Patricia Williams met her at the emergency entrance, relief evident on her middle-aged face. Patricia was a 20-year veteran of the hospital who had seen enough emergencies to know when they were in over their heads. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said quickly, leading Amanda through the automatic doors. "I know this is irregular, but with Dr. Reed being new and this being his first major emergency..." Through the treatment area windows, Amanda could see Dr. Reed standing over a chart, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something approaching panic. His expensive suit looked out of place in the clinical environment, and she could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the hospital's air conditioning. "What's his background?" Amanda asked as they walked quickly toward the treatment area. "Cardiology. He's apparently brilliant with heart procedures, but he's never worked emergency medicine. Most of his experience has been in scheduled surgeries and consultations," Patricia explained. "When Administrator Hayes hired him, emergency coverage wasn't really discussed. We usually send serious trauma cases to the regional hospital." The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, and Amanda could see more ambulances in the distance. Whatever had happened on Highway 12 was bigger than Millbrook General typically handled. "Dr. Reed," Patricia called out as they entered the main treatment area. "This is Dr. Chen from the veterinary clinic. She has some emergency medicine experience and offered to help." Reed looked up from the chart he'd been studying, his expression cycling through confusion, irritation, and something that might have been relief. "The veterinarian?" "Patricia, I appreciate the thought, but this is a human medical emergency. We can't have someone without proper training attempting to treat patients." "Of course," Amanda replied calmly, though she noticed Reed's hands shaking slightly as he held the chart. "I'm just here to assist in whatever way might be helpful. Extra hands, basic support, whatever you need." Before Reed could respond, the first ambulance crew burst through the doors with their patient. The EMT's report was rapid and professional. Male, approximately 45, suspected head trauma, possible internal bleeding, vitals unstable and dropping. Amanda watched as the trauma team, such as it was, sprang into action. Patricia and the other nurses moved with practiced efficiency, but Reed hesitated for a crucial moment, clearly overwhelmed by the pace and complexity of emergency medicine. "We need to establish an airway," Reed said, but his voice lacked the decisive authority emergency situations demanded. Amanda stepped back, staying out of the way while observing. Her trained eye immediately cataloged several concerns. The patient's pupils were unequal, suggesting increased intracranial pressure. His breathing pattern indicated possible brainstem involvement, and the way his left arm was positioned suggested neurological compromise. "Doctor," Patricia said urgently, "his pressure's dropping fast. What do you want to do?" Reed looked at the monitors, the patient, then back at the charts in his hands. The pause lasted only seconds, but in emergency medicine, seconds mattered. Amanda could see him struggling to process information that should have triggered immediate automatic responses. The sound of more sirens announced the arrival of additional patients, and Amanda watched Reed's face pale as he realized the scope of what they were facing. "Doctor?" "Reed," she said quietly, stepping closer. "Would you like me to start an IV on the next patient while you handle this one? Just basic support work." Reed nodded gratefully, apparently willing to accept help regardless of its source. "Yes, thank you. Patricia can show you where the supplies are." As the second patient was wheeled in, a woman with obvious chest trauma and difficulty breathing, Amanda moved into action. Her hands found the IV supplies automatically, muscle memory guiding movements she'd performed thousands of times. The woman's arm was difficult to access due to swelling from the accident, but Amanda located a vein on her first attempt, inserting the IV with the smooth precision of someone who had done this countless times under pressure. "Nice stick," commented the EMT who had brought the patient in. "You work here?" "Just helping out tonight," Amanda replied, already moving to connect the IV to the saline drip Patricia had prepared. By the time the third and fourth patients arrived, a pattern had emerged. Reed was competent with diagnosis and treatment plans, but he lacked the speed and decisive action that emergency medicine required. Amanda found herself naturally filling in the gaps, starting IVs, assisting with patient positioning, anticipating needs that Reed was too stressed to recognize. "Dr. Chen," Patricia said during a brief lull between ambulances, "where did you learn to do IVs like that? That was textbook perfect." Amanda paused in her preparation of supplies for the next patient. "You pick things up over the years," she said vaguely. "Animal anatomy and human anatomy aren't that different for basic procedures." The fifth patient changed everything. The EMT's report was grim. Female, mid-20s, severe head trauma from ejection during rollover, possible skull fracture, definite brain bleed. She's been unconscious since we found her, and her vitals are deteriorating. Amanda looked at the young woman on the stretcher and felt her heart clench. She couldn't have been older than Jenny, with long brown hair matted with blood and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the devastating injuries. Reed examined the patient quickly, his hands trembling as he checked her pupils and reflexes. The CT scan, when it came back, confirmed what Amanda had already suspected from her clinical observations. A massive subdural hematoma was putting pressure on the brain, and without immediate surgical intervention, the young woman would die. "We need to get her to regional immediately," Reed announced, but his voice carried the hollowness of someone who knew they were out of options. "Dr. Reed," Patricia said quietly, "the storm's gotten worse. Medical transport is grounded until it passes. Even by ambulance, regional is at least 90 minutes away." Reed stared at the CT images, then at the patient, then back at the images. His medical training told him what needed to be done, but his experience told him he wasn't capable of doing it. "She needs immediate decompression surgery," he said, more to himself than to the others. "Without it, she'll be dead within the hour." Amanda stepped closer to look at the CT images, her mind automatically analyzing the location and extent of the bleeding. She'd performed dozens of similar surgeries during her neurosurgical career, procedures that had become almost routine despite their complexity. "Dr. Reed," she said carefully, "what if someone could walk you through the procedure? Someone with neurosurgical experience?" Reed looked at her with desperate hope. "Do you know someone we could call? Someone who could guide us remotely?" Amanda took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would shatter the quiet life she'd built and expose the truth she'd hidden for 5 years. "You don't need to call anyone," she said quietly. I can do the surgery myself." The silence that followed was broken only by the beeping of monitors and the distant sound of thunder. Reed, Patricia, and the other staff members stared at Amanda as if she'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "What do you mean you can do the surgery?" Reed asked slowly. Amanda looked at the young woman on the table, her brain herniating as pressure built inside her skull. There was no time for lengthy explanations or gentle revelations. "I mean, I'm a board-certified neurosurgeon with 15 years of experience in trauma surgery," she said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she hadn't used in years. "I performed my residency at Johns Hopkins and headed the neurosurgery department at Metropolitan General in Nashville. I can save her life, but we need to move now." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Reed's mouth fell open, Patricia gasped audibly, and several staff members stopped what they were doing to stare. "That's impossible," Reed stammered. "You're a veterinarian. I looked you up. Your license, your practice." "Both are legitimate," Amanda replied, already moving toward the supply cabinet where surgical instruments were kept. "I completed veterinary school after I left human medicine. But right now, that young woman has about 40 minutes before the pressure in her skull causes irreversible brain damage. We can discuss my career history later." Reed continued to stare at her as if she were an apparition. "But how did you end up—" "Later," Amanda said firmly, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. "Patricia, I need you to prep OR 2. Call in whoever you can reach for surgical assistance. Dr. Reed, you can either help me save her life or continue asking questions while she dies." The transformation was startling. In the space of a few sentences, Amanda had shed her quiet veterinarian persona and become someone else entirely. Confident, decisive, radiating the kind of competence that comes from years of high-stakes medical practice. Patricia, recognizing leadership when she saw it, immediately began making calls to bring in additional staff. Reed, still processing what he'd heard, nodded slowly and began reviewing the patient's chart with new eyes. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his earlier condescension replaced by grudging respect. "Monitor her vitals and be ready to assist," Amanda replied, already reviewing the CT images with the focused intensity of a surgeon planning her approach. "And Dr. Reed, when this is over, when we've saved her life, then we can discuss everything else." As the surgical team assembled and the patient was wheeled toward the operating room, Amanda felt the familiar focus settling over her like a comfortable coat. For 5 years, she had hidden from this world, but now that she was back in it, muscle memory and training took over. The young woman on the table needed her skills, her experience, her willingness to take responsibility for another human life. Everything else, the questions, the explanations, the inevitable exposure of her carefully guarded past, would have to wait. In operating room 2, under the bright surgical lights she hadn't stood beneath in 5 years, Dr. Amanda Chen prepared to remember who she really was. The operating room at Millbrook General was smaller than the state-of-the-art facilities Amanda had worked in during her neurosurgical career, but it was well-equipped and sterile. As she scrubbed in, muscle memory guided her through the familiar ritual, the precise movements, the timing, the mental preparation for what lay ahead. Through the observation window, she could see the patient being prepped by Patricia and the surgical technician who had been called in from home. The young woman's name, they had learned, was Sarah Martinez, a college student traveling home for her sister's wedding. Her family was driving through the storm from 2 hours away, desperate to reach her bedside. Dr. Reed had volunteered to assist, though Amanda could see uncertainty in his eyes as he scrubbed beside her. Cardiovascular surgery and neurosurgery were different worlds, requiring different skills and mindsets. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly as they finished scrubbing. I have to ask, if you're really a neurosurgeon, why are you working as a veterinarian in a small town? Amanda paused in her preparation, knowing that her colleagues deserved some explanation before they trusted her with a patient's life. I left human medicine 5 years ago after a case went wrong. A patient died because of administrative decisions that prioritized profit over care. I couldn't continue practicing in a system that valued money over lives. Reed's expression softened with understanding. And you've been hiding here ever since? I haven't been hiding, Amanda corrected, pulling on her surgical gown. I've been healing. Animals don't have insurance companies denying necessary care. Their families genuinely want what's best for them. It's pure medicine without the corruption. They entered the OR, where Sarah Martinez lay unconscious, the monitors showing the deteriorating vital signs that indicated increasing intracranial pressure. Time was running out. Talk. They entered the OR, where Sarah Martinez lay unconscious, the monitors showing the deteriorating vital signs that indicated increasing intracranial pressure. Time was running out. Talk me through what you're going to do, Reed said as they took their positions around the table. Amanda positioned herself at the head of the table, her trained eyes studying the CT images displayed on the monitor. We're dealing with an acute subdural hematoma on the right side. The blood is compressing the brain tissue and causing a dangerous increase in intracranial pressure. I need to create a craniotomy, remove a section of skull bone, to access and evacuate the hematoma. Her hands moved with practiced confidence as she marked the incision site, calculating the optimal approach based on the location of the bleeding. The key is to work quickly but precisely. Any damage to healthy brain tissue could cause permanent neurological deficits. How many of these procedures have you performed? Patricia asked from her position managing the anesthesia. Several hundred, Amanda replied, beginning the initial incision. Both emergency cases like this and scheduled procedures. The emergency ones are always more challenging because you can't plan as thoroughly. As she worked, Amanda felt the familiar rhythm of surgery settling over her. The outside world faded away. The storm, the questions about her past, even her anxiety about exposing her secret. Nothing existed except the patient, the procedure, and the steady focus required to save a life. Retractors, she requested, and Reed positioned the instruments to hold back the scalp tissue. His movements were careful but uncertain, clearly outside his comfort zone. You're doing fine, Amanda assured him as she continued deeper into the surgical site. Just maintain steady pressure on the retractors. The bone work required both power tools and delicate hand instruments. Amanda used the high-speed drill to create the craniotomy, her movements controlled and precise despite the urgency of the situation. Years of experience had taught her to balance speed with accuracy, working fast enough to save the patient's life, but carefully enough to avoid causing additional damage. There, she said, as she lifted away the section of skull bone, exposing the brain tissue beneath. You can see the hematoma clearly now. The accumulation of blood was exactly where the CT scan had indicated, a dark mass pressing against the brain's surface. Using specialized instruments, Amanda began the careful process of evacuating the clot. Suction, she requested, and Patricia immediately responded, helping to clear the surgical field. Doctor. Reed, watch the monitors. I need to know immediately if there are any changes in her vital signs. As Amanda worked to remove the blood clot, she began to see immediate improvement in the brain tissue. The swelling was already beginning to decrease as pressure was relieved, and the brain's natural color started to return to areas that had been compressed. Her intracranial pressure is dropping, Reed reported, monitoring the specialized equipment. Blood pressure is stabilizing. Good. That's exactly what we want to see, Amanda replied, continuing her meticulous work. The brain is incredibly resilient, but it doesn't tolerate pressure well. By removing the hematoma, we're giving her brain the space it needs to heal. The procedure took 90 minutes, longer than Amanda would have preferred, but still within acceptable parameters for this type of emergency surgery. As she placed the final sutures in Sarah's scalp, the monitors showed stable vital signs and significantly improved neurological indicators. "That was incredible," Reed said quietly as they stepped back from the table. "I've never seen anything like that level of precision under emergency conditions." Amanda pulled off her surgical gloves, feeling the familiar mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction that followed successful surgery. She should make a full recovery. There might be some short-term memory issues as the swelling completely resolves, but the procedure was successful. As Sarah was moved to recovery, word of the surgery had spread throughout the small hospital. Staff members who had heard about the dramatic revelation kept finding reasons to walk past the recovery room, stealing glances at the woman who had been performing routine veterinary procedures just hours earlier. Administrator Hayes arrived within minutes of learning what had happened, his usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. "Dr. Chen, I need to speak with you immediately," he said, his tone suggesting this was not going to be a pleasant conversation. They met in his office, where Hayes closed the door and took a seat behind his large desk, clearly positioning himself as the authority figure in the room. "I need you to explain to me how a veterinarian just performed major neurosurgery in my hospital." Amanda remained standing, her posture reflecting the confidence she'd rediscovered during the surgery. "I performed surgery because a patient needed it, and I was qualified to provide it. Would you have preferred that she die while we waited for transport that wasn't coming?" "That's not the point," Hayes replied, his face reddening. "There are liability issues, licensing concerns, protocol violations. This hospital could lose its accreditation over something like this. And if I hadn't operated, that young woman would be dead," Amanda said calmly. "Which do you think her family will care more about?" Before Hayes could respond, Patricia knocked on the office door. "Excuse me, Mr. Hayes, but Sarah Martinez is awake and asking for the doctor who saved her life. Her family just arrived, and they want to thank Dr. Chen personally." The administrator's expression suggested he was caught between his bureaucratic concerns and the human reality of a life saved. "We'll discuss this later," he said finally. "Dr. Chen, I'll need a full report on your medical credentials and what happened here tonight." As Amanda left Hayes' office, she found Dr. Reed waiting in the hallway. His earlier arrogance had been completely replaced by something approaching humility. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "When I met you yesterday, I was completely out of line. I had no idea." "You had no way of knowing," Amanda replied diplomatically. "And I chose not to tell you." Reed shook his head. "That's not an excuse for the way I spoke to you. I've been in Millbrook for a week, and I've been acting like I'm better than everyone here. Tonight showed me how wrong I was." They walked together toward the recovery room where Sarah's family had gathered. Through the window, Amanda could see a middle-aged couple and a young man, probably Sarah's parents and brother, holding her hands and crying with relief. "The truth is," Reed continued, "I took this position because my family expects me to pay my dues in rural medicine before moving to a prestigious urban practice. I never intended to actually commit to this community." "And now?" Amanda asked. Reed paused, considering the question seriously. "Now I'm wondering what else I've been wrong about. If someone with your qualifications chose to practice here, maybe there's more to Millbrook than I realized." Sarah's mother noticed them through the window and immediately came to the door. "Are you Dr. Chen?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," the woman said, pulling Amanda into a fierce hug. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life. The nurses told us what you did, how you stepped up when she needed help." Over the woman's shoulder, Amanda could see Sarah awake and alert, talking quietly with her father. The surgery had been successful. There were no apparent neurological deficits, and her recovery was progressing exactly as hoped. "She's going to be fine," Amanda assured Sarah's mother. "The next few days will be important for monitoring, but all indications are positive." As the family returned to Sarah's bedside, Reed turned to Amanda with obvious curiosity. "What happens now? Do you go back to veterinary practice and pretend this never happened?" It was the question Amanda had been avoiding since the moment she'd revealed her identity. The secret that had protected her quiet life for 5 years was now exposed, and there was no going back to the anonymity she'd carefully cultivated. "I don't know," she admitted. "I hadn't planned on any of this." The answer to that question would come sooner than she expected. The next morning brought a knock on her clinic door that would force Amanda to confront not just her past, but her future as well. The morning after the surgery, Amanda sat in her clinic office staring at a stack of messages that had accumulated overnight. Word of her dramatic revelation had spread beyond Millbrook General, and journalists, medical colleagues, and curious members of the public were all trying to reach her. Jenny arrived early, her face flushed with excitement and concern. "Doctor?" "Chen, there are reporters outside. They're asking about what happened at the hospital last night. Is it true? Are you really a neurosurgeon?" Amanda nodded slowly, feeling the weight of exposure settling around her like a heavy coat. "It's true. I should have told you before now." "But why didn't you? I mean, why would you give up being a brain surgeon to become a veterinarian?" Jenny's confusion was evident in her voice. Before Amanda could answer, the phone rang with another media request, then another. By 10 in the morning, she had stopped answering calls altogether, but the questions kept coming. The knock on her door came at noon. Through the window, Amanda could see a woman in an expensive suit, accompanied by 2 men who had the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. "Dr. Chen?" the woman said when Amanda opened the door. "I'm Director Sarah Walsh from the Tennessee State Medical Board. I need to speak with you about the surgery you performed last night." Amanda invited them into her office, recognizing that this conversation had been inevitable from the moment she'd picked up a scalpel in Millbrook General's operating room. "Dr. Chen," Director Walsh began, consulting a file she'd brought with her. "According to our records, you surrendered your medical license 5 years ago and have been practicing veterinary medicine since then. Last night, you performed major neurosurgery on a human patient. I need to understand how and why this occurred." Amanda chose her words carefully, knowing that her response could have serious legal implications. "A patient was dying, and I was the only person present with the skills to save her life. I acted in good faith to prevent a death that would have otherwise occurred." "But you're not licensed to practice human medicine in Tennessee," one of the agents pointed out. "Regardless of your previous qualifications, performing surgery without proper licensing is illegal. As is allowing someone to die when you have the ability to save them," Amanda replied calmly. Director Walsh leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. "Dr. Chen, we've reviewed your previous record, and we know why you left medicine. The case that ended your career, the patient who died because of insurance denial, that wasn't your fault." The words hit Amanda like a physical blow. For 5 years, she had carried the guilt of that patient's death, even though she knew intellectually that administrative decisions beyond her control had caused the tragedy. Dr. Patricia Harrison was 62 years old, Director Walsh continued, reading from the file. She needed emergency surgery for a brain aneurysm, but her insurance company demanded prior authorization that delayed the procedure by 18 hours. By the time approval came through, it was too late. "Dr. Chen, This is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison from Metropolitan General in Nashville. The voice carried the authority of someone in a senior position. I was your chief of surgery before you left. I've been following the news about what happened in Millbrook. Amanda closed her eyes, remembering the woman's family, their grief, their understanding that she had done everything possible within a system that had failed them all. You fought the insurance decision for 6 hours, Director Walsh said. You even offered to perform the surgery for free, but hospital administration wouldn't allow it without insurance approval. When she died, you blamed yourself and walked away from medicine entirely. And now? Amanda asked, opening her eyes to meet the director's gaze. Now we have a problem, Director Walsh admitted. Technically, you practiced medicine without a license last night, but you also saved a life that would have been lost otherwise. The legal situation is complex. One of the agents spoke up. There's also the matter of public interest. Your story has already gone viral. Hidden neurosurgeon saves life is trending on social media. The public sees you as a hero, not a criminal. Amanda felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. What do you want from me? Director Walsh closed the file and leaned back in her chair. We want to offer you an opportunity to return to licensed practice. Your previous credentials were impeccable, and what you did last night demonstrates that your skills haven't diminished. The state would be willing to fast-track your license reinstatement if you're interested. And if I'm not interested, then we'll have to pursue the unlicensed practice charges, the director said regretfully. I don't want to, but the law is clear on this matter. Amanda stared out the window at the quiet streets of Millbrook, thinking about the life she had built here over the past 5 years. The animals she cared for, the families who trusted her, the peace she had found in serving a community that accepted her without question. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Director Walsh replied, standing to leave. But Dr. Chen, consider this. You saved Sarah Martinez's life last night. How many other lives could you save if you returned to medicine full-time? After they left, Amanda sat alone in her office, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of her veterinary practice. Through the treatment room door, she could see the examination table where she had treated thousands of animals, the equipment she had carefully maintained, the photos on the wall showing successful cases and grateful pet families. Her phone rang, and this time she answered it. Dr. Chen? This is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison from Metropolitan General in Nashville. The voice carried the authority of someone in a senior position. I was your chief of surgery before you left. I've been following the news about what happened in Millbrook. Dr. Morrison, Amanda replied, surprised to hear from her former mentor. Amanda, I've wanted to call you for years, but I respected your decision to leave medicine. What happened with Patricia Harrison was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. The entire medical community knew that. It felt like my fault, Amanda said quietly. Because you cared about your patients more than the politics. That's what made you an exceptional surgeon, Dr. Morrison replied. Amanda, I have a proposition for you. We've been struggling to fill our head of neurosurgery position since Dr. Williams retired. Your replacement lasted 2 years before burning out from the politics and insurance battles. Amanda felt her pulse quicken. What are you suggesting? Come back to Nashville. Take the department head position, but with conditions that would allow you to practice medicine the way you believe it should be practiced. We've established a foundation that covers emergency procedures regardless of insurance status. No more Patricia Harrison situations. The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge between Amanda's past and potential future. Return to the prestigious career she had walked away from, but with the power to change the things that had driven her away. I need to think about it, Amanda said. Of course. But Amanda? Don't let fear keep you from saving lives. The world needs surgeons who care more about patients than profit. That evening, as Amanda closed the clinic and prepared for another restless night of decision-making, she found Dr. Reed waiting by her truck. "I heard about the medical board visit," he said without preamble. "I wanted to thank you again for last night and to tell you something important." Amanda waited, curious about what had brought him here. "I called my department chief in Atlanta today," Reed continued. "I told him I was withdrawing my application for the fellowship position there. I'm staying in Millbrook." "What changed your mind?" Reed smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the expression seemed genuine. "I realized that I've been measuring success all wrong. Last night, watching you work, seeing what real medicine looks like when it's about saving lives instead of building careers. That's what I got into medicine for originally." He paused, looking out at the quiet streets of Millbrook. "This town needs doctors who are committed to the community, not just using it as a stepping stone. I want to be that kind of doctor." As Reed drove away, Amanda stood in the parking lot of her clinic, feeling the weight of decisions that would reshape her life once again. The past had caught up with her, but perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more pressure, and ultimately, a choice that would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone whose life she might touch with her skills. The quiet veterinarian who had hidden in Millbrook for 5 years was about to discover that some secrets were too important to keep hidden forever. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor that would tip the scales of Amanda's decision in a direction she hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Henderson arrived at the clinic before opening hours, clutching Whiskers in his carrier and looking more distressed than Amanda had ever seen her. "Doctor, Chen, I'm so sorry to bother you early, but something's wrong with Whiskers," the elderly woman said, her voice shaking. "He won't eat, he's hiding, and I think he's in pain." Amanda immediately opened the clinic and brought Mrs. Henderson and Whiskers into the examination room. As she gently lifted the orange tabby from his carrier, she could see that his condition had deteriorated significantly since his last visit. "When did this start?" Amanda asked, carefully palpating Whiskers' abdomen and noting his labored breathing. "Yesterday afternoon, right after I heard on the news that you might be leaving us," Mrs. Henderson said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Dr. Chen, is it true? Are you really going back to being a people doctor?" Amanda paused in her examination, suddenly understanding the connection. Animals, especially cats, were incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotional states. Whiskers had picked up on Mrs. Henderson's distress about potentially losing the veterinarian she trusted. "Let's focus on Whiskers right now," Amanda said gently, though she could see the fear in the elderly woman's eyes. The blood work and examination revealed what she'd suspected. Whiskers' kidney disease was progressing, and the stress had triggered a dangerous decline. As Amanda worked to stabilize Whiskers with IV fluids and medication, Mrs. Henderson sat quietly in the corner, her weathered hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You know," the elderly woman said softly, "after my Harold died 3 years ago, Whiskers and you were all I had left. Harold always said I worry too much, but when I heard you might leave—" The weight of Mrs. Henderson's words settled over Amanda like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about one elderly woman and her cat. It was about all the families in Millbrook who had come to depend on her care, her expertise, her presence in their community. "Mrs. Henderson," Amanda said carefully, "what if I could find you another excellent veterinarian? Someone younger, maybe more up to date on the latest treatments." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Dr. Chen, I'm 83 years old. I don't want someone new. I want someone who knows Whiskers, who understands that he's not just a cat to me. You've taken care of him like he was your own family." As if to emphasize the point, Whiskers began to purr as Amanda adjusted his IV line, responding to her touch with the trust that came from years of gentle care. Jenny arrived for work to find Amanda sitting in the examination room, holding Whiskers, while Mrs. Henderson dozed in the chair beside them. The young woman took one look at the scene and understood immediately what was happening. "The reporters are back," Jenny said quietly. "And there's a man in an expensive suit saying he's from some hospital in Nashville. He wants to talk to you about a job offer." Amanda nodded, feeling the pull of competing loyalties. Outside, her prestigious past was calling her back to the world of human medicine, offering her the chance to save countless lives and work at the cutting edge of neurosurgery. Inside this small examination room, an elderly woman and her beloved cat represented everything she had grown to love about her current life. "Jenny," Amanda said softly, "what do you think I should do?" The young woman considered the question seriously before answering. "Dr. Chen, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen how much you care about every animal that comes through that door, how much their families mean to you. But I've also heard the stories about what you used to do, about how many people's lives you saved." She paused, looking down at Whiskers purring contentedly in Amanda's arms. "Maybe the question isn't whether to stay or go. Maybe it's whether there's a way to do both." The comment sparked an idea that had been forming in the back of Amanda's mind since Dr. Morrison's call. What if she didn't have to choose between her two worlds? What if there was a way to honor both her commitment to Millbrook and her calling to practice human medicine? By noon, Amanda had made her decision. She called Dr. Morrison in Nashville, Director Walsh from the medical board, and Administrator Hayes from Millbrook General. Then she asked Jenny to schedule a town meeting for that evening at the community center. The meeting drew the largest crowd the Millbrook Community Center had seen in years. Local families filled the folding chairs, while overflow attendees stood along the walls. Dr. Reed sat in the front row, still processing his own decision to stay in Millbrook. Mrs. Henderson was there with several other elderly residents who depended on Amanda's veterinary services. Amanda stood at the front of the room, feeling nervous in a way she hadn't experienced since her first surgical presentation in medical school. These people had welcomed her into their community without question, and now she owed them an explanation. "5 years ago, I came to Millbrook to escape from human medicine," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "I was tired of fighting insurance companies, hospital administrators, and a system that seemed to care more about profit than patients." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people processed this confirmation of the rumors they'd been hearing. "I found peace here, working with animals and families who genuinely cared about each other. You welcomed me without asking questions about my past, and for that, I'll always be grateful." Amanda paused, looking out at the faces of people who had become her friends and neighbors. But 2 nights ago, a young woman's life was in danger, and I had the skills to save her. That reminded me that hiding from medicine doesn't make the need for good doctors go away. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been offered a position as head of neurosurgery at Metropolitan General in Nashville. It's an incredible opportunity to save lives and train the next generation of surgeons." The disappointed murmurs from the crowd were audible, and Amanda could see worry on many faces. "But," she continued, raising her voice slightly, "I've proposed a compromise that I hope will serve both this community and the broader medical field." The room fell silent as everyone waited to hear her solution. "I will take the position in Nashville, but only part-time. 3 days a week, I'll work at Metropolitan General, performing surgeries and training residents. The other 4 days, I'll be here in Millbrook, continuing to practice veterinary medicine and serving as a consulting physician for Millbrook General Hospital. The silence continued as people processed what she was proposing. Dr. Reed has agreed to stay permanently as chief of medicine at Millbrook General, Amanda continued, nodding toward the young cardiologist. Together, we'll establish a rural medicine fellowship program that brings young doctors to Millbrook for training in community health care. She looked directly at Mrs. Henderson, who was clutching Whisker's carrier in her lap. I'm not abandoning anyone or anything. I'm expanding my ability to serve, both here and in Nashville. The crowd began to buzz with conversation as neighbors discussed Amanda's proposal. Finally, Mayor Patricia Williams stood up from her seat in the front row. Dr. Chen, this sounds like you're trying to do 2 full-time jobs, the mayor said with concern. How can we be sure you won't burn out and end up leaving completely? It was a fair question, and Amanda had thought about it extensively while developing her plan. Because this time, I'm structuring my practice around my values instead of trying to work within a system that conflicts with them. I'll have the resources to practice medicine the way I believe it should be practiced, focused on patient care rather than politics. Dr. Reed stood up to address the crowd. I want to say something about Dr. Chen's proposal. 2 weeks ago, I came to Millbrook thinking I was better than this community, that rural medicine was beneath someone with my qualifications. Dr. Chen showed me how wrong I was. He paused, his voice taking on a tone of genuine conviction. The medicine she practiced the night of the accident, the care she shows for every animal and family in this room, that's the kind of doctor I want to become. This fellowship program she's proposing will bring more young doctors here who can learn what real medicine looks like. Over the next hour, community members asked questions, voiced concerns, and gradually embraced Amanda's vision for a new kind of medical practice. The compromise wasn't perfect, but it honored both her commitment to Millbrook and her calling to save human lives. As the meeting concluded, Mrs. Henderson approached Amanda with Whiskers in his carrier. Dr. Chen, I want you to know I'm proud of you for wanting to save people's lives again, but I'm also grateful you're not abandoning us old folks and our pets. Amanda smiled, gently stroking Whiskers through the carrier's mesh door. Mrs. Henderson, you and Whiskers taught me something important about medicine. It's not about the complexity of the procedures or the prestige of the position. It's about the relationships, the trust, and the difference you make in individual lives. 6 months later, Amanda stood in Operating Room 7 at Metropolitan General, preparing for a complex brain tumor removal that would take most of the day. Through the observation window, she could see medical students and residents gathering to watch the procedure, eager to learn from the surgeon who had become something of a legend since her return to human medicine. But tomorrow, she would be back in Millbrook, treating a horse with colic and teaching the latest rural medicine fellow how to suture wounds with the precision that comes from caring about every patient, regardless of species. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. Mrs. Henderson wanted me to tell you that Whiskers is doing great on his new medication. She's also knitting you a scarf for the winter. Says you'll need it for all that driving back and forth to Nashville. Amanda smiled as she began the delicate work of exposing the tumor without damaging healthy brain tissue. Around her, the surgical team worked with the smooth coordination that came from months of practice together. Dr. Chen asked one of the residents, is it true that you still practice veterinary medicine in a small town? 4 days a week, Amanda replied, her attention focused on the precise movements required to separate the tumor from surrounding tissue. It keeps me grounded, reminds me why I became a doctor in the first place. Don't you find it limiting? Another resident asked. Working with animals instead of advancing human medicine? The tumor came free cleanly, and the monitors showed stable vital signs throughout the procedure. Another life saved, another family that would have their loved one back whole and healthy. After surgery, Amanda would drive the 2 hours back to Millbrook, where she would check on Charlie the golden retriever's healing leg, review treatment plans for 3 horses recovering from various ailments, and prepare for the next day's appointments at her veterinary clinic. The dual practice wasn't easy. The driving, the constant switching between human and veterinary medicine, the challenge of maintaining expertise in both fields. But it had given her something she'd never had before: the ability to practice medicine exactly as she believed it should be practiced. In Nashville, she saved human lives and trained the next generation of neurosurgeons. In Millbrook, she cared for beloved animals and served a community that had accepted her without question. Both roles fed different parts of her soul, and together they made her a better doctor than she had ever been when focused on just one type of medicine. That evening, as she pulled into the parking lot behind her veterinary clinic, Amanda saw a familiar figure waiting by the door. Dr. Reed held a small cardboard box, and his expression suggested he needed her veterinary expertise rather than her neurosurgical skills. "Amanda, I'm sorry to bother you after your surgery day, but I found this kitten by the side of the road," he said, opening the box to reveal a tiny orange tabby that couldn't have been more than 6 weeks old. It was crying and seemed hurt. I didn't know what else to do. Amanda smiled, taking the box and immediately beginning to examine the small animal. The kitten was dehydrated and underweight, but appeared to have no serious injuries. "Probably separated from its mother too early," she diagnosed, already calculating the care regimen the kitten would need. "But he's going to be fine with proper nutrition and attention." As they walked into the clinic together, Reed asked the question that had been bothering him since Amanda's return to human medicine. "Do you ever regret your decision? Coming back to surgery, I mean?" Amanda considered the question as she prepared formula for the kitten. "I regret the time I lost, the lives I might have saved if I hadn't been so afraid of the system's flaws, but I don't regret the path that brought me here." She looked up from the kitten, who was already responding to the warm formula. "Reed, what I learned in my years away from human medicine is that caring for any living creature teaches you something about caring for all living creatures. The skills transfer, but more importantly, the compassion transfers." The kitten finished eating and curled up in Amanda's hands, purring softly. "This little guy will need homes," she said. "Know anyone who might be interested in a pet?" Reed's expression suggested he was already considering the possibility. "I've been thinking about getting a cat. My apartment feels pretty empty, and I could use the company." As they talked about kitten care and the responsibilities of pet ownership, Amanda realized that her decision to split her practice between human and veterinary medicine had created something she'd never expected: a model for how medicine could be practiced with both excellence and compassion. The young doctors who came to Millbrook for their rural medicine fellowships learned not just about treating patients in underserved communities, but about finding meaning and satisfaction in medicine beyond prestige and profit. Many of them went on to establish practices that prioritized patient care over financial considerations. The veterinary clinic continued to thrive, with Jenny now managing much of the day-to-day operations, and Amanda mentoring a young veterinarian who was considering his own path in rural practice. At Metropolitan General, Amanda's surgical outcomes continued to be among the best in the region. But more importantly, her approach to patient care had begun to influence the entire department. The foundation that covered emergency procedures regardless of insurance status had expanded to other hospitals, ensuring that no other family would face the tragedy that had driven Amanda from medicine 5 years earlier. As she locked up the clinic that night, the orphaned kitten sleeping peacefully in a warming box in the recovery area, Amanda reflected on the unexpected ways life had brought her full circle. She had tried to escape medicine and found a different kind of healing. She had tried to hide from her calling and discovered that her true calling was broader than she'd ever imagined. Tomorrow would bring new surgeries in Nashville and new patients in Millbrook. There would be lives to save, animals to heal, and young doctors to mentor. The woman who had once thought she had to choose between different kinds of medicine had learned that the best doctors are those who understand that all healing comes from the same source: the willingness to use your gifts in service of those who need them. The drive home took Amanda past the community center where she had announced her decision to split her practice. The building was dark now, but she could still remember the faces in that room: people who had trusted her with their beloved animals, who had welcomed her into their community, who had supported her decision to return to human medicine as long as she didn't forget them. In her rearview mirror, she could see the lights of Millbrook General Hospital, where Dr. Reed was probably finishing his evening rounds, caring for patients with the dedication he had learned from watching her practice medicine with integrity. And ahead of her, the road stretched toward Nashville, toward the hospital, where tomorrow she would once again stand in an operating room and hold someone's life in her hands. Dr. Amanda Chen had found her way home, and home, she had discovered, was not a place, but a way of practicing medicine that honored both her skills and her values. The healer in disguise had finally learned that the best disguise was no disguise at all, just the courage to be exactly who she was meant to be. The story of the veterinarian who was secretly a neurosurgeon had become local legend, but Amanda knew that the real story was simpler and more profound. Sometimes the most important healing happens when we learn to integrate all the parts of ourselves into something larger and more meaningful than any single identity could provide. As she pulled into her driveway, Amanda's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Martinez, the young woman whose life she had saved the night everything changed. The message was simple but profound. 6 months post-surgery, completely recovered. Starting medical school in the fall. Thank you for showing me what kind of doctor I want to become. Amanda smiled, knowing that the ripple effects of that stormy night would continue to spread in ways she could never fully track or measure. The healer in disguise had become simply a healer, and that transformation had changed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she touched. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, new opportunities to practice medicine the way she had always believed it should be practiced. And for the first time in years, Amanda Chen was exactly where she belonged. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below. Amanda paused in her work, considering how to explain something that had taken her years to understand. Some of the most important lessons about medicine come from stepping outside our comfort zones. Animals can't tell you where it hurts, so you have to be a better observer. Their families love them purely, without the complications that sometimes affect human medicine. And small communities teach you that every patient matters, regardless of their insurance status or social position. As she resumed the delicate surgery, Amanda reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years ago, she had fled human medicine, convinced that the system was irreparably broken. Her time in Millbrook had taught her that while the system still had problems, individual doctors could choose to practice medicine with integrity and compassion.